Welcome into the first edition of our Countdown to Kickoff series. I'm Evan Rogers alongside Taylor Vippolis, and today we're going to be talking about the initial expectations that we have for what is to be certainly an interesting and wild ride in the first year of Bill Belichick. Still crazy to even think that we're talking about that. So Taylor, when you kind of hear the words Bill Belichick and UNC football, I guess with this first season rapidly approaching, I guess what comes to mind?
It wouldn't be Carolina football if going into August, it wasn't just mayhem and craziness. And that's kind of what Bill Belichick coming to North Carolina has done for the program, where people are talking about North Carolina football, whether it's been good, bad this offseason. People are talking about North Carolina football. And the word that I think of when I think of this year with Bill Belichick is unprecedented, where not only do you have one of the best coaches in NFL history making the transition to college football, but you also have this North Carolina team that sent a lot of players out of the program and are bringing in a ton of players, where the incoming transfer count, 40 plus, the incoming freshman count, 20 plus. So you're looking at roughly like 70 new players to your program. You're only returning like 20 lettermen. How quickly can that group become like a cohesive unit? Because it's not just a video game where you're like, let's get him. You put him in and it's a seamless transition. When you have 70 new faces into a program, you should expect a learning curve, but also you have one of the best football minds in football history in Bill Belichick coaching your team.
Yeah, I mean, talking about one of the best football minds, it's just when you think about Bill Belichick and his run in the NFL and obviously the 6 Super Bowls as a head coach, the one thing that his teams were always known for is they wouldn't beat themselves. They were well-coached teams, and that's what I think this UNC team will be. I'm not saying they're going to necessarily win every game, but I just don't see a world where some of the faults of the previous staff was as good as the recruiting was and as good as the talent was that was on campus. You had the losses to Georgia Tech. You had the losses to UVA. You just had those late game blunders or those blunders against teams that you just can't lose to. And I don't think that's going to be the case this season. I think you're going to see a team in UNC that is one of the better coached teams in the ACC and one that isn't going to beat themselves. They're not going to make those mistakes late. Now, are there going to be teams that are more talented than them? Absolutely. And they've got multiple on the schedule that are more talented. But this isn't a team that I see going out and losing a game to UVA when you're undefeated. That just isn't something I see. But it's going to be fascinating. I mean, this is an experiment of experiments. I mean, this is something that's unheard of, like you said, unprecedented. I mean, the Deion Sanders thing caught a lot of smoke and still is for right reasons. And this is something in a totally different sense that's going to create even more smoke. So it's going to be incredible. And that Labor Day first game is just going to be an incredible spectacle.
Yeah, and if you're a North Carolina fan, I think all you could really ask for is to be this well-sound, well-coached football team, especially after some of the hiccups that you've seen from the previous staff, where you're giving up 70 points to James Madison and you have no pulse on that side of the ball to get a stop. And what this North Carolina staff currently has, it feels like a very professional NFL level type of staff coming to Chapel Hill. And I think that's something that a lot of fans are kind of hanging their hats on. And one particular for me as a letterman, where you're looking at this North Carolina team and Bill Belichick now on your sideline. And it's like, yes, he flamed out at the end of the New England tenure, but when you're comparing what he was up against in New England to what he's up against in Chapel Hill, across the sideline, there's no Andy Reids, there's no Patrick Mahomes. You're across the field from you, it's Dave Doran at NC State, it's Manny Diaz at Duke. And that's really the class that this North Carolina team that was picked to finish 8th, I believe, at ACC Media Days. This North Carolina team was picked to finish 8th, and you're looking around at the teams that are kind of in North Carolina's tier. It's really the ACC this year kind of feels like Clemson head and shoulders above everybody. Miami with Carson Beck is that next tier. SMU a year after going to the playoffs, see how they can kind of sustain that. And then you get into the mumbled ACC mess where it's like the Georgia Techs, the Louisvilles, Duke, NC State. Where does Florida State kind of rebound from last year? And then North Carolina is somewhere in that mix of teams. So when Carolina's projected to finish 8th, I think a lot of that is the unknown of how many people can kind of fit together as quickly as possible. And I think it's unrealistic to go into this year and being like, this Carolina team can win, double-digit games. This Carolina team can go to the ACC championship. That part, I think, is a bit unreal, even though you do have Bill Belichick, and that kind of inflates some of the preseason predictions, I think. But I don't think this North Carolina team being in that 4 to 6 range in the ACC is out of the question. And this is a team that I think can surprise a lot of people with what they brought in this offseason.
And sometimes what separates those teams in the middle, once you get kind of past the A and even the B tier, is the scheduling and how the schedule aligned. You kind of saw it last year a little bit in the ACC, where Duke, had a friendly schedule and performed well. Even SMU, who obviously made it to the playoff, they had one of the easier schedules in the conference. And the schedule for UNC this season sets up really nicely for them. You talk about the predicted order of finish that came out. UNC plays all 4 of the bottom teams to pick. In 6 of their 8 conference games, I think, come against the bottom half of the league. So it's definitely a friendly schedule that could set up for, a smooth transition in year 1 with Bill Belichick. I think the one thing that I can almost bank on with Bill Belichick is obviously the defense. I think this will be an improved defense. I don't want to get too far into that. We obviously will have later videos that kind of go into that side of the ball more. But even when you look at the down years in New England, even the down years Bill Belichick at the beginning of his head coaching career in Cleveland, he almost every year had a team that was in the top half in the NFL in scoring defense. That just hasn't been a thing at North Carolina in probably 10 years. I mean, we're talking about within the last 5-6 years, there's been multiple years where UNC's been outside the top 100 nationally in scoring defense. So I think you're going to see a team that's fundamentally sound defensively and just overall in general. And I also think you could see some scheduling luck maybe sway this team to get to that 8-9 win mark, or even higher if it really turns their way.
The defensive point that you made, I think, is a great one that you could even expand on a bit, where Bill Belichick has forgotten more about defense than most people can remember in their entire life. He knows defense. Steve Belichick, who he brings in from Washington, he knows defense. Carolina is replacing their entire front in this 4-2-5 defense that they have, which again is unprecedented. The amount of change and the amount of turnover. For me, I've had a tough time. Shout out to the guys doing the recruiting and the people like Jason Staples who are locked in with this team. I'm like, okay, he's here now. Where did this guy come from? Where did this guy come from? There's been so much change. But I do think you're right that this North Carolina team, just looking at the personnel that they have, feels like a team that's going to have to hang their hat on the defensive side of the ball and win with defense. They bring Gio Lopez over from South Alabama to be their quarterback this year. You would assume he's going to win that battle at camp. But their leading receiver, Kobe Paysour, 365 yards from last season. The next leading receiver, Chris Culver, 135 yards. I think Jordan Shipp rounds out that group of returning receivers with over 100 yards. So for me, this is an offense where when you have this much unknown and this much turnover, you'd really love for one piece that carried over from that past group, whether it's a running back of Omar and Hampton's quality, a receiver of Josh Downs' quality. This North Carolina team really doesn't have that. And you have a quarterback going from this G5 level, trying to make the jump to this Power 5 level. But Gio Lopez, I thought, showed a lot of promise at South Alabama. 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, throws for over 2,500 yards, added 7 rushing touchdowns. So he looks like he can be that dual threat guy. But yeah, this when you're projecting out this North Carolina team and initial expectations, this team feels like a team that has to win with defense.